Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Steam curled lazily from the cup he held, carrying the scent of chamomile and something unexpectedly warm that wasn't just the tea. I had been lost in my thoughts, the cool tile beneath my bare feet contrasting sharply with the sudden heat that rushed to my cheeks. He stepped closer, and for a brief moment, our eyes locked. That glance, so intense, so aware, made my pulse skip a beat. "Here. I thought you might like some tea," he said, voice low, a teasing lilt dancing at the edges. His hand brushed mine as he handed me the cup, a touch so fleeting yet electric that it sent a shiver down my spine. My fingers lingered a fraction too long against his, and the room seemed smaller somehow, the distance between us suddenly unbearable. I caught him stealing glances at me, and a mischievous smile tugged at my lips. He noticed, and the playful tension between us thickened, almost tangible. Each small movement, the tilt of his head, the way he shifted on his feet, was a silent conversation that neither of us needed to speak aloud. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum, and I was acutely aware of the warmth that pooled beneath my skin, heat that seemed to mirror the closeness of our bodies. For a heartbeat, time slowed. The room was filled with nothing but the quiet hum of the evening and the faint scent of tea, yet I felt every small, deliberate motion, the soft brush of his sleeve against mine, the teasing curl of his lips, the way his gaze lingered just a moment too long. I was both terrified and thrilled by the charged silence, wondering who would break it first. Then, he leaned in slightly, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the shift in the air between us, and whispered, "Did you want me to stay a little longer?" The question, light yet heavy with unspoken meaning, left me breathless. I swallowed, unsure if my racing heartbeat was fear or desire, and realized that something had undeniably changed. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. I poured the tea almost absent-mindedly, watching him linger by the counter, the quiet hum of the kitchen filling the spaces our words hadn't yet reached. It had always been like this, glances exchanged in passing, small touches that lingered longer than necessary, conversations that felt like they were dancing around something we weren't brave enough to name. I had told myself it was harmless, just a closeness born of familiarity, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. He moved closer, leaning on the edge of the counter, casual yet deliberate, and I felt my chest tighten. There had been times before when I caught him watching me, or when our hands had brushed and lingered, and I'd pushed it away with rational explanations. But tonight, something about the way he looked at me, the mix of curiosity, admiration, and something heavier, unspoken, made it impossible to ignore. I thought about the months we had spent in this strange, uncharted space between parenthood and friendship. My late nights of worry, his awkward attempts at comfort, the moments when he seemed to understand me better than anyone else. There were secrets in our shared glances, little confessions hidden in the way we both hesitated before speaking. Every interaction carried weight, and tonight, it felt like that weight had finally settled between us, warm and undeniable. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice cutting through my spiraling thoughts. The simple concern sent a wave of unexpected emotion through me. I nodded, though my heart was still racing. I've been thinking," I admitted, hesitant, about how much has changed, for both of us. He tilted his head, eyes searching mine. There was a quiet understanding there, a recognition of the truths we'd been avoiding. And yet, the playful tension never left, it hovered in the air like a secret waiting to be revealed. I felt an almost magnetic pull toward him, a dangerous curiosity that made my thoughts tangle with desire and guilt. I sipped my tea, the warmth spreading through me, and watched him carefully. The small smile he gave me, the soft, teasing, and filled with unspoken questions, made my pulse thrum. There was so much we weren't saying, but every shared silence, every careful touch, spoke volumes. And just when I thought I had a grip on my composure, his hand brushed against mine again, lighter this time, almost accidental, or so it seemed. My breath caught, and I realized that no matter how much I tried to define boundaries, tonight would change everything. The sound of distant footsteps from upstairs made both of us jump slightly, the tension breaking for only a second, leaving me acutely aware of the space between us, charged and alive. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The soft clatter of dishes from the sink made me glance up, and there he was again, leaning casually against the counter, but this time, there was a subtle edge to him, a quiet challenge in his gaze that made my stomach twist. He had always been close, comforting even, but tonight the air between us felt electric, a storm barely contained. I caught myself noticing everything, the way his sleeve brushed against his wrist, the tense curl of his lips, the slight lift of his brow as if daring me to acknowledge what simmered beneath the surface. My pulse raced, part fear, part something else I couldn't name, as I realized how aware I was of him. And yet, there was another layer, jealousy, sharp and unwelcome, because I knew he noticed the neighbor's compliments last week, the fleeting attention of someone his own age. It twisted in my chest, making the closeness between us feel both thrilling and forbidden. He moved a little closer under the pretense of reaching for a cup, and I caught his scent, warm, familiar, and somehow intoxicating. The brief brush of his hand against mine sent a jolt through me, one that neither of us ignored. Our eyes met, and the silence stretched, thick with questions neither of us dared to voice. I didn't mean to, he started, and stopped, the words hanging like fragile glass between us. I felt my lips part, heart hammering, not sure whether I should tell him to step back or lean closer. Every nerve in my body screamed at me, every instinct pointing toward the tension we'd been dancing around for months. A playful smile, almost teasing, flickered across his face. "You're thinking too much," he whispered, but his eyes betrayed him. There was longing there, a dangerous pull that made it impossible to look away. I knew we were on the edge, teetering between what was safe and what was irresistible. Just as I was about to speak, the phone rang from the living room, breaking the moment. The spell shattered, leaving a charged silence that neither of us moved to fill. And yet, as he turned to leave, his lingering glance promised that this tension was far from over. Something was coming, something neither of us could ignore. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The house had finally settled into quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside, made the space feel smaller, more intimate. I found myself in the living room, finishing the last of my tea, when he appeared at the doorway, holding a small tray. His presence alone seemed to pull the air closer around us, heavy with anticipation. "I thought you might like a little company," he said, his voice low, teasing, but there was something unspoken in it, a challenge wrapped in familiarity. The way he stepped closer, his shadow falling across the soft rug where I sat, made my heart race and my thoughts scatter. I was acutely aware of every detail, the tilt of his head, the warmth radiating from him, the faint brush of his sleeve against mine as he reached to set the tray down. We were alone. Completely alone. And the tension between us, that fragile, electric thread, pulled taut. Each glance carried years of unspoken words, each small movement charged with something neither of us could yet name. I wanted to speak, to break the silence, but the words caught in my throat, lost beneath the thrum of my own heartbeat. You don't have to stay," I murmured, though my voice betrayed me with a hint of hope. He didn't move away. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, just enough that I could feel the shift in the air, the subtle pull of his presence against mine. The closeness was undeniable, unavoidable, and for a moment I wondered if we'd both been waiting for this. A soft smile curved his lips, playful but intense. "I think I'll stay," he said, and it was impossible to tell whether it was a joke or a confession. I laughed nervously, though my fingers trembled slightly on the cup I held. Then, the distant click of the front door startled us both. Our eyes darted toward it, and in that instant, the spell broke, yet the charged energy remained, suspended between us like a live wire. We were closer than ever, yet the next moment was uncertain. And as I looked back at him, his gaze holding mine with a mixture of daring and vulnerability, I knew something had shifted forever. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The evening had grown heavy with quiet anticipation, the house bathed in the golden glow of the table lamp. I hadn't expected him to sit so close on the sofa, the warmth of his presence pressing against the careful boundaries I had set for months. Every glance, every subtle movement carried years of unspoken tension, but tonight, it felt like that tension was about to break. I can't stop thinking about it, he said suddenly, voice trembling just enough to betray the weight of his words. My heart lurched. The way he looked at me, vulnerable, daring, yet hesitant, made every rational thought evaporate. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the air between us felt too fragile, too charged. I never meant for it to happen like this, I whispered, my fingers gripping the edge of my cup. His gaze softened, yet a flicker of something unreadable passed across his eyes. And then, he laughed, low and incredulous, as if the world itself had played a cruel trick on us. What if I told you, it's been mutual all along, he said, the words hanging like a confession. My breath caught. All the stolen glances, all the fleeting touches, they weren't one-sided. Every heartbeat, every moment of hesitation now made sense. The attraction I had tried to deny was mirrored in him, an invisible thread we had both danced around. Before I could respond, the phone on the side table buzzed, and a message preview flashed on the screen. I know what's going on. We need to talk. Her friend. My stomach sank. Someone else had noticed the tension, someone who had silently observed what I had thought was private. The thrill of secrecy, the danger of discovery, it sent a jolt through me. He reached out instinctively, placing a hand near mine on the sofa, not touching, just close enough to make me aware of the potential. The closeness, the shared secret, and the new risk combined into a heady mix of excitement and fear. We both froze, caught in the instant between the safe and the forbidden, knowing that the next step could change everything. I guess, we're not the only ones with secrets, he murmured, eyes still locked on mine, a wry smile tugging at his lips. My pulse raced, my mind spun with what-ifs and hidden desires, and I realized that nothing would ever be the same. The moment teetered on the edge, electric and unresolved, leaving us suspended in that fragile, intoxicating tension. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The house was quiet except for the hum of the evening air conditioner, yet the tension felt deafening. We faced each other across the living room, both aware that nothing could go back to how it had been. His eyes searched mine, a mixture of guilt, longing, and defiance that mirrored my own tangled emotions. I can't pretend anymore, I said, voice trembling despite my attempt to sound steady. We've been skirting the edges for months, and it's eating me alive. The words hung in the air, heavier than I had imagined. He swallowed, stepping closer, careful but deliberate, bridging the small gap between us. I know. I've tried to ignore it, to act normal, but I can't. Not anymore. There was raw honesty in his tone, the kind that makes your chest ache with the weight of unspoken truths. The confession opened something in me, a flood of emotions I'd kept locked away, desire, fear, guilt, and relief. I laughed softly, almost in disbelief, because for months, we had tiptoed around this invisible line, and now it felt like it had shattered in an instant. Every stolen glance, every lingering touch suddenly made sense. But then, reality tugged at the edges of the moment. His hand hovered near mine, hesitant, and I realized the risk wasn't gone. The messages, the whispers, the eyes of others, they were all still out there. We couldn't ignore the consequences, yet standing here, in this charged, quiet room, I didn't care. "I don't know what's going to happen," he said, his voice low, raw, but not without hope. "But I know I can't step away from this, from you." My breath caught, my chest tight with emotion. I wanted to argue, to be cautious, but the magnetic pull between us was undeniable. I reached out, fingertips brushing against his, and the world seemed to narrow to that single, electric connection. Time slowed, allowing us to exist in that fragile, perfect moment, aware of the risks, yet refusing to retreat. A distant sound from the hallway reminded us that life would not pause, that choices had consequences, but for now, the energy between us was enough. Suspense, guilt, longing, and desire swirled in the quiet of the living room, leaving both of us breathless, hearts racing, and emotions raw. In that charged pause, it was clear that the next step, whatever it would be, was inevitable. The moment was unresolved yet complete, leaving space for the final chapter, where hearts and choices would finally meet in a romantic closure. Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The evening air had softened, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine through the open window. We sat together on the living room sofa, shoulders nearly touching, the tension that had defined weeks between us replaced with something gentler, more profound. Our eyes met, and this time, there was no hesitation, only understanding, warmth, and a quiet relief that neither of us had realized we'd been craving. I never imagined it could feel like this," he admitted, voice low, softening with honesty. My fingers found his, our hands naturally intertwining, and a small, shared smile broke across both our faces. The room felt lighter, as if the years of unspoken feelings and secret glances had finally settled into place. I laughed softly, a sound that seemed to ease the last of the lingering tension. "Neither did I," I whispered, my heart fluttering in a way I hadn't thought possible. For the first time in months, there was no fear, no guilt, only the pure, undeniable connection we had finally allowed ourselves to acknowledge. He leaned closer, resting his forehead lightly against mine. The closeness was comforting, intimate, and yet entirely safe, an affirmation that what had been growing between us wasn't just desire, but care, trust, and shared understanding. I realized that this moment, this simple gesture, carried more weight than any dramatic confession or stolen glance we'd experienced before. "I think we finally understand each other," he murmured, his thumb brushing across the back of my hand. "And maybe, that's all we need right now." I nodded, letting the warmth of his hand anchor me. There was a sense of promise in that touch, a bond formed from honesty, patience, and subtle moments that had built up over time. Every laugh we had shared, every lingering look, every heartbeat spent wondering about the other, had led us here. Outside, the sky darkened to a deep indigo, stars beginning to peek through. Inside, the quiet hum of the night wrapped around us like a blanket. And in that serene, suspended moment, it became clear, whatever challenges lay ahead, we had found each other in a way that was real, grounding, and undeniably romantic. We sat like that for a long while, hands entwined, hearts beating in unison, and I knew that the story we'd shared, the tension, the longing, the near misses, had led to this perfect, intimate understanding. A chapter closed, a bond strengthened, and a romance finally allowed to breathe.